Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of One Vision, the FinTech Views. Joining us today is Christopher Juneau, Senior Vice President, Head of Product Marketing with SAP Concur. And welcome back, Chris.
Great to be back, Theo. Great to see you.
It's good to see you too. Apart from our apparently mutual love for food and wine, we also have other common interests from a work perspective, which is fun to know. Because I didn't even realize until recently that you guys have a brand new CFO Insights report that came out. It felt like it was just recently when we had our last discussion from the findings from the loss report. So I am so psyched to have you back on the show and we can talk about the survey.
Great. It's great to be back and happy to discuss the survey.
Yeah, we love numbers. What can I say?
Yeah, that's right. We're data geeks in addition to our love of food and wine.
Yes, we're data people. Appreciate the wonderful stuff of life in addition to numbers and AI and all of that. So let's go right into it. Looking at that survey, a few things was really, really interesting that popped out. First of all, I appreciated having the last year's report so I can take a look at what's changed, what's different. From your perspective, did anything surprise you coming out from, this year's Insight report, which is titled Strategic Actions for Growth? I love the word growth, by the way. Did anything at all that came out from the survey surprise you?
A few things. First, this is our third year of doing this. And second, we expanded the audiences to IT and HR to also bring in their view in addition to finance. And a few things to your specific question that stood out was the major shift in CFO's view of the top challenges. And the first, at 37% of CFOs cited geopolitical tensions as their top external challenge, up from 11% last year. The second, which I was surprised at, but I think I have context for it, was that worsening economic conditions actually decreased from a CFO's perspective as a challenge from 55% in 2024 to 41% in 2025. And what's interesting about that, and put that into context, is like, wait a minute, the economic conditions we're in now, this survey was done before January 20th, 25. So would
Yeah.
that number be the same or higher? Don't know, but it's interesting that the that on the challenges list it was reduced, but I put it in context of the timing of the survey. And then the last element that I found fascinating from the survey is that in 2023, 1% of CFOs listed manual processes as their top challenge. This survey, 38% are treating manual processes as their top challenge. And I think there's a lot to unpack in that stat.
Absolutely. I think to your point, the data point around economic concerns, that jumped out at me too, because again, like you say, right, looking at the results where we are today, when we are today, which
Right.
is, more than a quarter after a new year, the condition is so different than, when the survey was being done. So that absolutely makes sense. Thank you for the context. I was going to ask him, like, wait a minute, that's odd.
It's counterintuitive.
Sitting at a different vantage point right now, but it speaks to how dynamic everything is too, as well. And to your last point about the manual processes, let's dive into that because that's one thing that's in every conversation, I would say, when we think about process improvement, when we think about creating efficiency, the first thing that always pop up is manual process. And as you say, that has jumped from being a concern for just 1% of the CFO to 38% of the CFO. That's a big jump in 1 year's time. What do you think is driving this big shift in focus, and how best should organizations tackle this challenge? What can they do?
Great question. I think what's ultimately driving this shift in emphasis from the 1% to the 38% is the growing adoption of AI. And I think when you and I last spoke, I said 2025 is the year of realization of the ROI from AI. And I think businesses are now seeing that and seeing its application. and seeing the advantages that gives them, especially in the finance area. And and the survey also showed that the goal of the CFOs is saying, hey, to fuel my expansion, I need to optimize my costs and drive efficiencies, which again fits right in the wheelhouse of AI and the automation of these manual processes. Uh, and we've seen this, our business, Concur business over 30 years is built on automating this manual and paper intensive financial process called expense reporting. Um, and so as we've been on the same journey as these CFOs are on now, because we've been infusing our services for over 10 plus years with AI. Now with the onset of generative AI, it's creating even more opportunities for us to automate this painful, uh, painful manual process called expense claim reporting, right? Um, and now generative AI is bringing this whole new wave in. Like we introduced Joule. We'll be incorporating SAP's generative AI copilot Joule into Concur services to do additional mundane tasks that are the bane of employees. As an example, uh, you know, hey, I was you and I were just talking. I was just in London, about to submit my expense report. Jewel in the future will be able to say, "Well, hold on, you didn't have a meal expense here. How did you get from your hotel to there? I don't see a taxi or an Uber ride." So it will look at it and say, "Oh, before you submit, you may want, did you miss this or did you mean to include this?" Second, would employees go to a portal now to check on their T&E policy? Right? I think it's interesting now with AI, are portals dead? Instead, why can't I within Concur Expense or within anywhere, I could be in Success Factors and ask Jules like, hey, am I allowed to fly business class if it's over 4 hours? Simple question. What should I pay for a hotel while I'm in London? Another simple question. What would be in policy? So instead of me going look at the T&E policy in the portal, which may have been updated, God knows when, I can rely on Joule to do those things in the moment. And so again, further automation of this manual process where the user has to go do something. Now it's much easier for the user to get the information they require to spend smart in their company.
Yeah, you're absolutely smart because last time we talked, right? If we want to go from A to B, we go for, meetings, we trying to get deals closed, all of that. None of that has to do with, oh, let's spend half an hour sitting down, going through policies, submitting receipts and all. It's mundane work. It's things that it's not pleasant. And
That plan.
right, no one wants to do that. So these are the perfect scenarios for tech to take over and so that we can focus on what we need to do. I want to go back to that one point you were saying, the growing adoption of AI, and this is what we're seeing. The other aspect when we think about using AI for tech and create efficiency, reducing things that we don't really like to do, that's one of the key numbers that jumped out from this year's report as well. And I smiled when I saw it because I'm like, yes, this is like literally, this is my pain point. In there, it says over half of the
Yeah.
people surveyed, right, 57%, say general finance tasks such as generating emails, transcribing emails,
Mhm.
summarizing documents. All of these can be highly automated by
Mhm.
AI compared to a year before, which was only 7%. And that is so true. Like if you think about a lot of the internal documents,
Mhm.
policy procedures, stacks of PDF documents that you have
Yeah,
to go through.
that's
Now we can do it so much faster, isn't it?
absolutely. Yeah, because that's AI is uniquely suited, as we both know, and all who are listening to this podcast, for consuming large amounts of data, distilling patterns in that data, identifying anomalies in that data, and ultimately then now with generative AI and agentic AI, how can I now put that data to work on my behalf and have these agentic agents actually doing work on my behalf, whether it be they're looking at CFOs are looking at, hey, creating new pricing models, you know, fraud monitoring, and so forth. So how can I put this to work? So it's one thing to do the mundane task. Now that I've got this data, how can I put how can I put the agentic AI or just Gen AI in general to work for me to solve even more complex challenges beyond just the mundane process automation.
Absolutely. So, in your point of view, what are some of the use cases that are the most promising?
I see the most promising is the core use case is anything where humans are not great at looking at vast amounts of data, right? In terms of seeking patterns and so forth. Um, and I look at fraud detection as a great example. Fraud detection is all about combining different sources of information and looking for patterns to identify those anomalies and so forth. So, and humans aren't great at that. When I first started at Concur, when the earth cooled, our recommendation was random sample of approximately 20% of your expense reports to audit. Random sample. That was considered a best practice. Now we have a service, Concur Verify, which is self-serve audit, that'll automatically evaluate 100% of your expense reports. 100%, regardless of your volume. And our data shows that 97% of the audit checks were completed by Verify, and only 3% required human intervention.
Wow.
So imagine the old days when the earth cooled, 20% random audit. Now I can do 100%, but now my humans only are involved in 3%.
Saves time.
Saves time, saves money, cost efficiency, all the things. And you talk to finance executives all the time. That's one group I typically do that are not expanding within organizations. They're always constrained by resources regardless of the complexity of their business. So enabling, giving them some efficiencies and so forth enables them to do the work they really should be doing for their organizations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't agree more. Now, if I might go back to
Mhm.
one of the original things you talked about, the three things that jumped out at you when you first read the report. First
Mhm.
item, geopolitical concern. If I may, growing economic uncertainty, tensions between nations. I almost feel like we are dealing with breaking news on a very regular basis, way more frequently than we should, which makes forecasting very, very difficult. It makes cost management very, very difficult, which is no wonder now there's some of the biggest challenges that finance leaders face, or frankly, any executives face. How can they best leverage the tools that you have in place to improve what they need to do when it comes to financial planning and cost control?
Well, clearly the technology is evolving to help the CFOs meet these needs. In our survey, 43% of finance leaders believe that AI will likely improve forecasting accuracy. 30% are already using AI for that. And I think that, again, is uniquely suited to the volatility, um, you know, to help answer these questions, because the best antidote for uncertain times is efficiency and transparency. You can't manage what you don't know or you can't predict. With AI, one of the use cases we're toying with is, what if I made changes to my travel policy? Jewel, make some recommendations that I'd like to reduce my X by X%. Or I'm considering maybe changing who flies business class. What would be the impact? In being able to model and assess, I think also in times of uncertainty, I don't want to say you can game it out, but you're trying to see what are the potential outcomes and so forth. And AI is uniquely suited for that.
It's like you can use it to pull different levers and see, how would it turn out and be able to do it much faster and much easier.
That's right, because you be proactive. Historically, I'll be honest, expense reporting, 20 years ago was really just about reconciliation. We always said we can enable you to control spend. It's like, when I started 20 plus years ago, it's really a reconciliation process. But now, going further up into the process, leveraging generative AI, we can be proactive, managing that spend as the user trends and so forth, and informing the user at the time of while they're traveling about what's in policy and not in policy. You want to consider this. So I think it's enabling from a reconciliation process to be a proactive financial process that can be actively managed by CFOs.
That's a very good point. Being able to have the tools to be more proactive in what you do. Now,
That's right.
before I let you go, when we think about being proactive and responding to how our world is changing, one of the things that is top of mind for a lot of executives is when it comes to cybersecurity.
Sure.
And unsurprisingly, right, given we can use AI and the emerging tools to do a lot of things that we can do things more efficiently, well, bad actors can also use the tools to
That's right.
do bad things more efficiently as well. And so one of the things we see is majority of finance leaders are planning to increase their budget when it comes to combating cybersecurity, to respond to the threats. But here's the interesting thing, and it goes back to what you said earlier. Your report expanded the scope, to include IT and HR. Now, there seems to be a divergence of opinion as it comes to who should drive these initiatives. Should it be finance? Should it be IT? Who else should it be? And the report seems to suggest that this is also dependent on the size and maturity of the organization that we're dealing with. What should we do to best address this challenge, or perhaps turn it into an opportunity?
Great question. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. We see the results in the survey. It's truly bimodal. Is 50+% of finance leaders, 53% of IT leaders believe the responsibility for driving progress on cybersecurity or reinforcing should be shared between the finance and IT leaders. Then the other side says 45% finance leaders and 43% of IT leaders believe this responsibility should lie with IT. It's like, it's literally, it's like, mirror opposites. I think what this really comes down to is the role of the CFO to bridge the gaps across the organization. The collaboration at the C-suite needs to increase even more. And the CFO, I believe, plays a critical role, whether it be walking across the aisle to IT with regard to AI initiatives or cybersecurity, but then also a closer partnership with folks they may not have partnered closely with in the past, such as a CISO, Chief Information Security Officers, regarding the cybersecurity threat. Because ultimately, what does the CFO care about? It's mitigating risk, assuring business continuity, and safeguarding assets. All are in which are all elements of IT and also the CISO. But the CFO could be at the center with regard to that collaboration and orchestration. And I think when we talk in the future, I think we'll see the CFO's role. I predict that the next survey will show them playing a greater role in orchestration across the CIO and the Chief Information Security Officer.
You literally took my last question straight out from my mouth. I was going to ask you, do you have prediction on what we're going to see? Because this is very, very different compared to 30 years ago when I started in IT.
Right.
And, how we look at things, right? And the CFO is always in this corner office. They're looking at these spreadsheets, and that's all they care about. They don't care about anything else outside. And,
That's right.
Based on this report that you were saying, and based on what you're saying, it seems like they are playing a more collaborative role in bringing people together, which, might actually be a good thing.
I agree. Well, it goes back to your last podcast, and I'm trying to remember the gentleman. You're talking about risk in banking, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
that whole perspective of the risk profile is changing dramatically. So the CFO is going to have to come out of that corner office and walk across to talk to the CIO, because what are they talking to him about? Hey, I want to do more with AI. I'm trying to deal with these manual processes. Oh, wait a minute. These same AI could be giving me risk from a cybersecurity. Let's walk over and talk to the CISO now. And what are we doing? So yes, the CFO will come out of the corner office is my prediction in 2026.
Here you go. I think this is a perfect ending to wrap up our conversation. They will come out from the corner office. Now, I will remember this and ask you next time when you do the next year survey. Let's make sure that is in the question. I think you're absolutely right on the money, by the way. So
Thank you.
And that I'll make sure that we put the survey in the show notes as well, because I think numbers tell a really, really interesting story, especially this year's report. And until the next time we do meet and chat again, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us on the show. Always fun to talk with you. Not just numbers, and apparently something else beyond that as well. And for the rest of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of One Vision. We'll talk to you next week.